Shalom. Welcome to Light of the Nations. We are studying the Rambam, the third chapter of Hilchot Beit Habechira, and we're still learning about details of the Menorah. I'd just like to mention at this point, before we continue, if you are following the programming and you're aware of what's in the news as we are recording, what's referred to as the Temple Mount controversy has once again reared its head and is something that is in the headlines here in Israel of late. By the Temple Mount controversy, we refer to the entire issue as to whether or not Jews should be ascending the Temple Mount, as to whether or not it should be of concern to them, what the fate of the Temple Mount is, and the whole idea of really trying to again reinstate in our consciousness the centrality of the Temple and the Temple Mount in our mindset. And the controversy has been rekindled now because of the efforts of a large group of rabbis, learned men, leaders in their communities who are attempting to again instill within their followings the desire and the will to go and be seen there on the Temple Mount by God. This has evoked a large response, and as usual, also a non-response and a negative response from other quarters who feel that it's not time for us to be concerned with the Temple Mount, we shouldn't be going to the Temple Mount. And it just kind of like goes on and on, kind of like a revelation of a certain sort of very tired, exiled mindset that unfortunately many people are suffering from, feeling that, we should just be satisfied with the way things are, we should just be happy, and that God will step in at some point in time and tap us on the shoulder with some sort of mystic or divine finger, and that will be the time when there'll be some sort of paradigm shift and everything is going to change. And of course that is not our position at all. That is not what we aspire to or subscribe to. We believe that Hashem expects us to take responsibility for ourselves, to show how much we feel that something is missing from our lives, to be as actively involved as possible with the concept of the temple, the research, the education, and the building of the temple, to whatever extent we are able to, because we believe that, in fact, this is our duty and our obligation and our privilege, and that God will only step in, as it were, and help us after we've shown that it really means something to us. And the state of the Temple Mount today here in Israel, the sorry state of affairs, of how much the Jewish people have become subjugated to the whim of oppressors and those who would seek to destroy her heritage and her legacy and her connection to everything that's holy to her. This is all very, very sad, but it's also very telling of kind of the place that we are in now mentally. And to me, this is a time for us to redouble our efforts and restate our position and strengthen ourselves with fortitude and understanding that we are called upon in this world by the God of Israel, and this is perfect timing right after observing the festival of Shavuot, when we stood literally at the foot of Mount Sinai and reaffirmed our pledge and reaffirm the cognizance that we have a covenant with God, which is based on action, which is based on change, which is based on our willingness to show that we're willing to do something for Him in this world, because God knows He does enough for us. And so at this particular time, just having stood there again and said, yes, we will do and we will obey, we will keep the Torah, we will make it real. It's not a fairy tale, it's not a coffee table book. There really is a mountain of the Lord. There really is a place that He chose, and He really wants His house to be there, and He really wants us to be concerned with it, and He really wants us to be as active as possible within the confines of Torah law to see to it that that temple will become a reality. So it's all very fitting that I remind you that this is going on now, and this is the backdrop of everything that we are doing here in Jerusalem, and also, I think, the inspiration of what we are studying now. We're studying laws that are extremely precise and detailed about vessels that are going to be in the Holy Temple. We've been studying about the layouts and the construction and the topography and the architecture of the Holy Temple. And we're going to be studying all sorts of things as we continue our series in the future, God willing. Why? What is it really all about? Don't forget, we're studying at the moment about the Menorah. There's a lot of details here about the decorations of the Menorah and what it's made of and what function it plays in the temple, but don't forget that what it's really all about is listening to the voice of God. It's about kindling that light which shines forth through those windows into the whole world, the divine presence. And that means taking responsibility for wanting that presence to be here. That's why we're studying about the menorah. We're not studying ancient history. And just as a reminder, we're not studying just a code of law or a set of rules relating to something from the ancient world. So I hope that you're with the program, because the program is to be studying about these things so that we can create them, so that we can build them, so that we can be as involved as possible in the positive commandment of making a place for the presence of God to shine forth. And there are many ways to go about doing that. Right now we're studying together so that we'll be prepared to create whatever we can for the temple. And one day, hopefully very soon, we'll be building the temple together. Another way to make that presence of God felt is by ascending to the Temple Mount according to all of the rules of our Holy Torah in purity, knowing exactly where we're going and carefully, but making a statement bodily. And the statement is, yes, world, and yes, people of Israel, and yes, Hashem, the God of Israel, we do care about your honor. We're not doing it for ourselves. We care about the place of the Holy Temple, the place that you chose, the place which you have stated will be the manifestation of your glory in this world. And we cannot allow a situation in which that is desecrated. And that's exactly what's going on, and it won't change until we do something about it. So, we have been studying about the menorah, and in the third halakha of chapter 3, just reviewing for a moment, Maimonides told us again that altogether there are 22 cups, 9 flowers, and 11 knobs or buttons, and that all of them impede each other. They all have to be there, and even if one of these 42 decorations is missing, then the entire menorah is not kosher, and that is again because the decorations on the menorah are not just decorations, but they're actually part of the kosherness of the vessel. And then I actually wanted to go over again part of Halacha Daled, which we ended off the last time we were together studying about the menorah. I want to just take that from the top again, because there's several complex ideas here. So, again, in this reckoning, this tally of the decorations on the menorah, Maimonides tells us in Halacha Daled, B'meh Devarim Amurim. When do we say this? When do we say that we must have these 42 features? Bishas Sahua Zahav, when you're talking about a menorah created of gold, aval, shar minei matachot, eino sin bagviim kafturim ufrachim. But when a menorah would be constructed of any other type of metal, we do not make these decorations. Does Maimonides mean that you don't have to, or that you must not? Here is a question. Basically, it would seem that from the language of Maimonides, I believe he's really saying that if you would create a menorah out of any other metal, you would not be allowed to, you would not be permitted to feature these designs. According to Rashi, on the other hand, for example, in his explanation of the Gemara in Menachot, it would seem that he seems to indicate that if you would make a menorah out of another metal, you may make these decorations, whereas if you make it out of gold, you must. That's Rashi, but as far as Maimonides is concerned here, the Rambam seems to be saying, no, you only make that out of gold. And don't forget, there is such a thing as making a menorah out of another metal, and we've discussed this. We call it the historical precedent of the menorah, of the Chashmonaim, the famous Maccabees, the story of Hanukkah, who created a menorah in stages. The first one that they created when they re-entered the temple and purified it was out of simple metal rods. They were made apparently out of lead. This is all that they were able to come up with at the time. Much later, a number of years passed by and they regained some of their wealth. They were able to construct a menorah out of silver, and only many years later, perhaps 23 years later, they created a menorah out of gold. But again, we mentioned recently that there is a principle in Jewish law, according to the Torah, that you try to fulfill a mitzvah, a commandment, as best as possible, even if you can only do part of that commandment. That part is the part that you must do. Now, Maimonides continues here in Halacha Daled and tells us, V'chein menorah haba zahav, a menorah which is created out of gold, tihia kula kikar im neroteha. V'tihi kula miksha min ha'ashatot. A menorah made out of gold must be of one piece, must be created out of one piece of gold, and that piece is called a kikar. And the kikar, it's a Hebrew word, is generally translated as talent. It's a certain measure of gold. And Maimonides tells us that is including its lamps, the lamps of the menorah. Complex idea, because the lamps of the menorah apparently they're like bowls, actually, or cups that hold the oil, because it's olive oil which is to be kindled in the menorah, drawn through a wick. But these lamps, actually, they sit on the top of the branches. They are fixed into the branches. They are apparently from the same piece of gold, all right? In other words, they are created out of the same kikar, the same talent of gold, but they are not hewn they are not attached, in other words, to the menorah. They are hewn out of the same talent of gold, but they are detachable. They are separate, but yet, according to Maimonides, they are to sit permanently atop the branches, but they actually could be detached. They are separate lamps. Now, what is this talent, this kikar of gold? Maimonides tells us that when we create a menorah out of gold, it must be of a certain weight. It has to be a kikar, a talent of gold. And that actually, according to our sages, includes the lamps of the menorah also. However, as we're going to learn, it does not include other vessels of the menorah that are intrinsically important to the menorah. I refer here to a group of vessels that we are commanded about in the book of Exodus. It is a kind of like a portable sink, and tongs and small what are called ash pans that are used to clean the individual lamps of the menorah. Part of the service of the menorah, which is attended to every day, is called the improving, the hatava of the lamps, where the Kohen actually has a job that he must cleanse the lamps of the menorah from the used wicks of the previous evening and some of the buildup of charcoal in the lamps. He has to clean this, and he has tools which are made out of gold that he uses to accomplish this task. They are also made out of pure gold, but they are not made out of the same talent, and you'll see soon why this is an important issue. So, the talent that we're speaking about when when the Rambam tells us that the menorah, which is made out of gold, has to be made out of one whole kikar, including its lamps, this actually has a specific measure. There's actually two types of kikar. There's a kikar which is used for mundane purposes, and there is a kikar, a talent, which is used for kodesh, for holy. In our time, all of these measurements, biblical measurements, have been translated and calculated by various authorities today, different opinions. So I'll just tell you that in our time today, the weight of the talent of gold which is used to create the menorah would be measured at 42.5 kilogram of gold. And because there has been a certain change in the nature of gold, apparently, according to the experts over the years, actually in the time of the Second Temple, this was more like 51 kilograms. But today, this would measure, a talent, a kikar, would measure out at 42.5 kilo. And again, there are many different experts that talk about how we arrive at these conclusions. So this is supposed to be out of one piece of gold, and that's because of the verse in Exodus 25:31 that tells us that it is one piece. And again, Rashi on those verses explains how the menorah is to be beaten out with hammers of one piece, and the branches are to be separated. It's not to be made out of the joining of little pieces or that type of thing. Maimonides continues here and tells us, "V'shel shar minei matachot ein makpidin al mishkala." If the menorah were to be created out of any other metal, and again that sometimes is the case throughout history, we are not concerned, we are not scrupulous regarding its weight. the idea of the specific weight of the kikar, the talent, which, as I mentioned, would measure in our time at 42.5 kilo, that's only if you are creating a menorah out of gold. If you're creating a menorah out of any other metal, we wouldn't be paying any attention at all to the weight. Thus, as Maimonides continues and ends halacha dalid, v'im hayta chalula kshera. If the menorah was hollow, then it would be kosher. Now, there is this important commentary on the Rambam, the Kesef Mishnah, who understands here, according to his understanding, that Maimonides is basically speaking about a menorah of a different type of metal, whose branches would be made out, whose branches would be hollow, because that menorah out of a different type of metal does not have to be made out of one piece. And bidiavad, which means kind of as a second best stature in halacha, that would be kosher. However, there are other commentators who believe that actually it's not only talking about a menorah of another type of metal, but even a menorah of zahav, of gold, could also have hollow branches, would be kosher. So depends how we interpret Maimonides. But basically, we can say that the difference practically between a menorah out of gold and a menorah out of other metals is that the menorah out of gold must have the 7 branches. It must be 18 handbreadths high. As we're going to see, that's approximately the height of an average man. Let's just say for the moment 6 feet. And it has to have, if it's made out of gold, it has to have all 42 decorations, flowers, cups, and knobs. And it must be a kikar, the weight of a kikar. If a menorah is made out of any other metal, it must have 7 branches, but it would not have any of the decorations, and also its weight would not be important, and essentially its height would also not be important. Halacha he ve'eino sinota le'olam min hagrutaot ben shayta shel zahav ben shayta shel shar minei matachot. This word grutaot means basically broken pieces, smaller pieces. This is based on a teaching in Tractate Menachot, again, of the Babylonian Talmud, that the menorah must be made out of a piece and not out of smaller pieces. And there's a question between, again, Rashi and Maimonides regarding if this applies to gold or to everything. And then another important commentary, the Mishnah Lamelech, seems to believe that the first priority, lechatchila, the best possibility regarding a menorah, would be that it must be out of one piece, but if it's made out of any other metal, then bidiavad, second best, it would be kosher. In any event, these are all different interpretations of Maimonides. Suffice it to say that regarding the main goal of a golden menorah, which is the best possible way of fulfilling the commandment, it should be made out of one piece of gold. Now, in the next halacha, the 6th halacha, Vav, we learn about these tools that are instructed by the actual verse of the Torah itself to be used for cleansing the individual lamps of the menorah. And we read, Hamelkachayim v'hamachtaot uchlei hashemen einan miklal hakikar. The tongs and the, what are called, I've seen it translated as the ash pans, the small little vessels, and the oil containers as well, the decanters that hold the olive oil, all of these items are not part of the actual kikar of gold, which you might have thought that they were, and I'll tell you why in a moment. So these are vessels that are closely associated with the menorah itself. It is the set of vessels that are used as part of the service every day for cleansing the lamps, and also the vessels, the cruse of oil that hold the oil for the menorah. There are actually 2 different sizes of olive oil cruses, which you shall see here. There is a larger vessel, which actually holds all of the oil for one lighting of the entire menorah. And then there is the smaller vessel, which holds the measurement of a half a lug, which is the amount of oil for one particular lamp. So when we recall the famous story of the cruse of oil that was recovered in the temple when the Hashmonaim re-entered and cleansed the temple, the story of Hanukkah, and we know that one cruse was found that bore the seal of the high priest that was still pure, that actually refers to the larger of these two vessels. That was enough oil for each individual lamp in the menorah, but only for one lighting. Now, part of the actual service of the menorah, what do we mean by the service of the menorah? Now again, we'll see that there is a question between the different commentators about when the menorah is lit exactly when it is cleansed. The basic principle, though, is that the Holy Temple is not really functioning at night. In other words, all of the korbanot, all of the offerings and everything that goes on in the temple goes on from daybreak until sunset. The only aspect of the divine service, and this is something that we mentioned in a deeper teaching around the time of Hanukkah, the only aspect of the divine service which actually takes place at night is the fact that the menorah is illuminating the nights, which is very important on a deep level because it shows the reality of the presence of God shining forth into the world through those unusual windows that we learned about in the Book of Kings, the windows in the building of the sanctuary that are narrow on the inside and wide on the outside to allow the light of the divine presence to go out into the world. So the menorah is lit in the evening and is shining, is illuminating throughout the night. But there's an aspect of what's called the service of the menorah which is done in the morning, and that is called Hatavat HaNerot. And that involves chiefly the cleansing of the lamps, of the buildup, the unused oil and the used wicks from the previous evening. And that is actually done together at the time of the offering of the Tamid, of the daily offering in the morning. And we're going to be learning about that. So again, the tools, the tongs, the ash pans, and the vessels for oil, this is what Maimonides tells us in Halacha Vav, are not part of the kikar, the original talent of the menorah, which includes the body of the menorah and its lamps. Shaharei, because after all, Ne'amar ban menorah, the verse states regarding the menorah, Zahav Tahor. The verse in the Torah states regarding the menorah that it is to be made out of pure gold. V'chazar v'amar, but then again there's another verse which says, Umalkacheha umachtoteha zahav tahor. Not another verse, but the idea is after having stated that the menorah is made out of pure gold, the verse comes back again and says, and also its tongs and its fire and its ash pans are also made out of pure gold. This is Exodus 25:38, and that actually shows us the reason that the verse repeats again the phrase Zahav Tahor, pure gold, is to show us that this is a different pure gold. In other words, that these are to also be made out of pure gold, but not the original pure gold that the verse was speaking about, which is the source of the menorah and its lamps. V'lo ne'amar neroteha zahav tahor, but the verse does not specify that its lamps, its candles, its lamps are made out of pure gold. Mipnei shahanerot kvu'in b'menorah v'heim miklal hakikar. And Maimonides, this is actually, I hope we have time to finish this, a rather complex piece of reasoning that involves other commentaries as well. Maimonides tells us the reason that the verse doesn't tell us that its lamps are made out of pure gold is because the lamps are fixed in the menorah, and they are actually part and parcel of the kikar itself. This is the opinion of Maimonides, that these lamps, and you can see a close-up of how they look. These are like individual containers, that like cups that sit on top of each one of the branches at the top. Maimonides says they are not taken off. They are placed there, and they stay there. However, and they are made of the original kikar, but they are not made as one piece of the menorah. This is his position. And the verse does not specify regarding these lamps that they are made out of pure gold, because it is understood, since they are a part of the original talents of the gold. And again, we're going to see that there is also an opinion of Maimonides, and Rashi also has something to say about this regarding exactly how these lamps are made and what their position is vis-a-vis the kikar, the original talent, and whether or not they are detached. And interestingly, what is this service of the cleansing of the menorah, the individual lamps, and when it takes place exactly? There are some opinions about that, and this is part of the joy of Torah study, not only for its own knowledge. We're learning about very specific and complex halachot that unfortunately many people today do not involve themselves with. So not only is it a joy to study, but chiefly we also remember that the main purpose of the study of the Torah is to bring us to action. And we're not just learning about an obsolete subject, we're learning about the subject that we want to be very much occupied and concerned with, and that is the establishment of the Holy Temple in order to bring back the light of the Divine Presence into the world, the light to Israel, and the light to the nations.